Hope you're well. Can you see the screen? I'm just going to look at this one on 20. Particular attention because I'm going to give you an exercise to do just now. I'm going to give you an exercise to do just now, very similar to this. So here we have the equilibrium equation. The equilibrium equation is your level of income and output Y is equal to 1 over 1 minus C, all that into C plus CO plus I plus G minus CT. Minus CT, so this should be in minus. Are you familiar with that equation now, all of you? So what is 1 over 1 minus C? Quickly, somebody. Say that again.
Multiplier.
It's a multiplier, correct. And what is C?
MPC.
Right, good. And then in your brackets you got CO. What's CO? Come on, guys, quickly.
It's an autonomous consumption.
Right, CO is autonomous consumption. I is your investments. G is government spending. Minus your CT. Right, CT is your MPC, marginal propensity to consume, times your taxation. So you're given, assuming your investment is 300. Right, investment is 300. Right, you got your C is 0.8. Your autonomous consumption is 500. Your investment is 300. Government spending is 400, and your taxes is 300. Right, to determine the equilibrium level of income and output, let me just put this on the big screen. So you want to know what the equilibrium level of income and output is. Right? How do you calculate that? All you do is substitute the information given into that formula. It's as simple as that. Okay. So 1 over 1 minus C. So you know from board maths, you got to simplify your brackets first. You got to simplify your brackets first. Okay, so you bring down the 1 over 1 minus C, right? Which is C is, we know given as 0.8. In your brackets, you get 500 plus 300 plus 400 minus 0.8 of 300. Anybody have a problem with that? So your C is also your MPC, which is 0.8 into 300, which is your taxes. And you simplify the brackets, you get 960. You'll get 960. So 1 over 1 minus 0.8 is 1 over 0.2 times 960 will give you 4,800. All right, number 2, here we have assumed there's an increase in investment from 300 to 310. I have to make the assumption that there's an increase in investment. So all we do is slot the figures into the equation, and that's what we get at the bottom. Right, now to the activity 2, let's just do this together. Right? Use the following goods market model to explain full employment. Indicate any shift and or movement on the diagram. Right, on the vertical axis, you got your demand for goods and services Z. On the horizontal axis, you've got your level of income and output Y. You've got your 45-degree line, which suggests that any point on that line, your Y is equal to Z. Any point on the 45-degree line indicates that an equilibrium point between Y and Z. Then you have a point of origin is 0, and that your line of equality is for the 45-degree line. Remember, on your vertical axis, you measure your autonomous variables, right? Autonomous government spending, autonomous consumption, autonomous investments, and all of that we refer to it as, in this particular case, we call it Z. ZO is your autonomous components on the vertical axis. On the horizontal axis, we have the level of income and output Y. So Y naught is on the horizontal axis, and at that level of output, and it cuts the 45-degree line at a point. And before we do that, you have the ZZ curve. What is your ZZ curve? Somebody tell me. You'll find that the ZZ curve starts at a point above 0. Somebody tell me what the ZZ curve is very quickly. Come on.
The demand curve, sir.
Yes, it's the demand curve. It's the demand curve for goods and services. And you'll note that the demand curve is upward sloping from left to right. Why is it upward sloping? And what is the significance of an upward sloping curve?
It has a positive relationship.
What has you're correct. What has a positive relationship? You're right.
The demand curve with the level of income and output.
And the demand for goods and services.
Yes.
Very, very good. So in other words, if your income and output increases, the demand for goods and services Z will also increase. If there's a decrease in the income and output for goods, the demand for goods and services will also decrease. So there's a positive relation between those two variables. And because of the positive relationship, you'll find that there's an upward sloping curve. Now the question now, then you have, so you have your equilibrium level of output is Y0, and your equilibrium level of demand is Z0. And your equilibrium point is where those two curves where the Z curve cuts the 45-degree line. But that point is your equilibrium point. So be careful, don't confuse the equilibrium point with the equilibrium level of income and output Y. Right? If the question requires you to specify the point, so it's where the ZZ curve cuts the 45-degree, that's your equilibrium point. As we just said just now, that any point on the 45-degree line represents points of equilibrium. So this is one point now. So that's where the economy is at Y0. How do we move the economy to full employment? So what is your understanding of full employment? The YF is full employment, right? Would somebody explain what that means? What is YF? All your factors of production that are available are fully employed. What are those factors of production? Your natural resources, your labor, your capital, and your entrepreneurship. Isn't that so?
Yes.
So we're saying that at full employment, all of those resources are fully employed. Nothing is left idle. Okay. So when the question says that you've got to give an explanation and draw a diagram to show the shift and or movement in the diagram. We want to know, how does the economy move from Y0 to YF? So we need to describe in words and then show what happens in the diagram. I think the first thing that we need to indicate is that the movement of the economy from Y0 to YF is in an expansionary fiscal policy. We want to grow the economy and use up so once we get to YF, all our resources are fully utilized, correct? So therefore it's an expansionary fiscal policy. Why is it fiscal policy? Right? It says in the question, it's the goods market model. So fiscal policy is relevant in the real sector, the goods market. So therefore, this is fiscal policy. So therefore, the first thing you must understand, the movement from Y0 to YF is an expansionary fiscal policy. And to achieve this expansionary fiscal policy, what do we need to expand the economy? What are the policy variables available?
Government spending.
Government spending and or taxation. Very good. So when we talk about an expansionary fiscal policy, we want to move the economy to full employment in this particular case. I'm telling you this because you need to explain this in words, right? and explain it in the diagram. So we can use either increase in government spending or a decrease in taxation. So those are the two policy variables available. And if you want to achieve an expansionary fiscal policy, you must increase government spending and you must decrease or decrease taxation. So the question I want to ask you, when there's an expansionary fiscal policy, how does it affect the national budget? It leads to a deficit in the national budget, okay? It leads to a deficit in the national budget. Remember, the national budget is lodged with the Treasury, the Department of Treasury. Good. So an expansionary policy will lead, because you're gonna take funds out of that budget to expand the economy. You might take out 100 million to build hospitals and schools, or just hospitals. So when you take off money, it's going to lead to a deficit in the budget. So let's look at those policy variables. Firstly, government spending. So we agree that government spending needs to increase. So let's look at the chain. Let's look at the chain relation. If there's an increase in government spending, could somebody tell me what the chain relation is? What is the chain of events? If there's an increase in government spending, what happens?
Okay, demand increases and your Z will also increase. Your Y, your Z will increase and your Y will increase.
Brilliant, very good. So an expansionary fiscal policy using government spending will lead to an increase in the demand for goods and services Z, and that will increase the level of income and output Y. Good. What about taxes? I want the chain of events for taxation. That's your second fiscal policy variable. So what is the chain of events for your taxation? What is that one item that you need to put in?
Disposable income.
Very good. So when you talk about an expansionary fiscal policy, then you're going to have a decrease in taxation. So I remember I said if you earn 1,000 rands and your taxes are 200, you're going to take home 800. So your disposable income is 800. You're taking home 1,000 rands minus your taxes, which is 200. So your disposable income is 800. So therefore, when there's a decrease in taxes, the disposable income will increase. That's the first point in your chain of events. A decrease in taxes will lead to an increase in disposable income. When that disposable income increases, consumption is going to increase. Consumption increases, the demand for goods and services Z will increase, and the level of income and output will increase. So you can't leave out that disposable income in that chain of events. And you can have an expansionary fiscal policy or a contractionary fiscal policy. So here we're talking about an expansionary fiscal policy. You also have a contractionary fiscal policy, which is the opposite. An expansionary fiscal policy using taxes, chain of events, decrease in taxes will lead to an increase in disposable income, and that will cause consumption to increase. And obviously, if your consumption increases, you're going to demand more goods and services. Therefore, your Z increases and the level of income output Y increases. That's your chain of events. Chain of events are extremely important. So firstly, we have two policy variables that government uses to implement fiscal policy. In this particular example, we'll be referring to an expansionary fiscal policy. And the policy variables that we use is government spending and taxation. Let's take government spending. An increase in government spending will lead to an increase in the demand for goods and services Z, and that will lead to an increase in the level of income and output Y. That's the first policy variable, government spending. The second policy variable is taxation. Since this is an expansionary fiscal policy, taxation will decrease. That will result in an increase in your disposable income, which I've just explained. Increase in disposable income will cause an increase in consumption. Increase in consumption will lead to an increase in demand for goods and services, and your levels of income and output will increase as well. So that is the chain of events that you must know. Question says, use the following goods market to explain full employment. So in other words, if there's an increase in government spending, there'll be an increase in output. So your Y will shift to the left, to the right. It'll keep on moving to the right until we get to full employment. So how do we get to full employment? By using the two policy variables, government spending and taxation. There's the diagram. The diagram is not totally correct. You see that YF, then YF should be exactly where the Z1 curve cuts the 45-degree line. You understand? It should be a little bit to the right. You agree with me?
Yes, it doesn't look like it goes through the center of it.
It will be slightly to the right, so that because it must cut the ZZ curve. The ZZ curve must cut at the 45 at that point. At that point is your full employment. Again, on the vertical axis, we have demand for goods and services. On the horizontal axis, we have the level of income and output. And we said your original output was what? Your original equilibrium level of output was Y0. The demand for goods and services was Z0. And your demand curve was ZZ. Now, with the increase your policy variables, there will be a parallel shift. There will be a parallel upward shift in the ZZ curve to ZZ1. It is a change in your autonomous components that will cause a shift in the demand curve. A change in autonomous components that will cause a shift. So here there was a change in government spending and a change in taxation. And both those changes has resulted in a parallel upward movement in the demand curve to ZZ1. With the increase in government spending and the decrease in taxation, the level of income and output expands. It will continue to expand until we get to YF. And at YF, the YF will cut the new. We have a situation where your new ZZ curve cuts the 45-degree line at a point, And at that point, you have your full employment. And what does YF suggest? That all of the resources that are available to the economy is fully utilized and nothing is left idle. Right? Change in your marginal propensity to consume. Your MPC is part of your induced consumption. Your consumption function is made up of two parts. Your CO plus CY, CYD. CO is your autonomous consumption and CYD is your induced consumption. About the CYD, we said that the C, which is your MPC, marginal propensity to consume, it tells us what proportion of your income is spent on consumption goods. If your income, for example, is 1,000 rands and your MPC is 0.8, it simply means that 0.8 of 1,000 rand is spent on consumption goods and the balance is saved. So what is 0.8 of 1,000 rands? 0.8 times 1,000 rands is 800 rands. So therefore, it tells us that 800 rands of our income, of 1,000 rands, will be spent on consumer goods, and the 200 rand that remains will be saved. Also remember that the MPC gives us the slope of the consumption function or the demand function. The higher the MPC, the steeper the slope. The lower the MPC, the flatter the slope. If your MPC is 0.4, what does that tell you? Disposable income is 1,000 rand. What does it tell you?
That 400 rand is only going to be consumed for goods and services. And then 100 rand is going to go towards savings.
Good. So if you look at the diagram now, if we talk about the MPC, on the vertical axis we've got the demand Z. You'll find that Z does not change. The MPC focuses on your disposable income. It does not change. It does not affect the autonomous consumption. Therefore, your point of origin, your point of Z0 is the same. What will happen is the demand curve, it will swivel either up or down. In this case, your original demand curve was ZZ. It cut the 45-degree line at Y0. If there's a decrease in the MPC, you'll have a downward swivel in the curve. The curve will be flatter, and you'll find that there'll be a leftward shift there'll be a decrease in your level of income and output. So it's the opposite. And there we have tutorial activity 3. All you got to do is slot those figures. There's two different sets of figures, one for Z1 and one for Z2. So all you got to do is slot each one into the formula and get an answer. Okay, let's do it. Let's do it B. What your spending for Z1 is. Now the question says, what is your autonomous spending, right?
140.
Correct. What is your autonomous spending for Z2?
66.
66. Calculate what is the multiplier for Z1?
5.
Can hear you?
5.
So 0.8 is 5. 1 over 1 minus 0.8. 1 minus 0.8 is 0.2. And so 1 over 0.2 is 5. What about the other one?
2.5, sir.
2.5.
2.5 is correct. Calculate the equilibrium level of income and output for Z and Z, especially Z1.
Yes, for Z1 I got 700, and then for Z2 I got 165.
You all got 700 for Z1.
Yeah. The difference between the two is 535.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. Z1 is all you do is take your multiplier to get the level of income and output is your multiplier times your autonomous spending. So we work out the autonomous spending for Z1 is 140. We know the multiplier for Z1 is 5. So 5 times 140 is 700. For Z2, the multiplier you calculated yourself is 2.5. You said that your autonomous spending is 66. So 2.5 times 66 will give you your total level of income and output at 165. The third part of it is to comment. Both autonomous spending and the marginal propensity to consume are higher for Z1 than for Z2. Therefore, the equilibrium level of income output is higher for Z1 than for Z2. If you have to compare the two.
Yes, I think I got it.
I'm not going to do this. Right? You can do this on your own, right? There's the diagram for Z1. Right? You said your autonomous spending. You did the calculation was 140, and it cuts a 45 degree at a point. We call that E0. That's all. There's your autonomous spending there. 50 plus 60 plus 46 minus 0.8 times 20 is equal to 140. Remember the point that the Z curve cuts the 45-degree line is your point of equilibrium. So E0 is your equilibrium point. Your output level is, your equilibrium output is Y0, and your autonomous consumption is 140. On the vertical axis, you measure your autonomous variables. You measure consumption, you'll measure investments, autonomous consumption, government spending, and exports on the vertical axis. On the horizontal axis, you measure your level of income and output Y. The second equation, the figures were 30, 26, 16, minus 6 into 10 was 66. You got the answer to that. And then you put that into a diagram. Your autonomous spending is 66. The ZZ curve cuts the 45-degree line at E0, and your equilibrium level of income is Y0. And you'll see from the diagram that the equilibrium level of output income, physically, is larger than the second diagram. Then we get to the next tutorial activity, which is, so remember the multiplier which I said to you in the initial injection, right, will result in a greater than impact on the level of income and output. For example, if there's an injection of 100 million rand by government, so the eventual benefit of that initial injection will lead to a greater than benefit to the economy, and that occurs as a result of the multiplier. So what we want to do now is to illustrate that. So we have an initial injection of 100 units by government. The demand for goods and services is 100, and your levels of income and output is 100. So the first thing to do is to calculate the multiplier. All right. So the question is, assume that the marginal propensity to consume is 0.75 or 3/4. The same thing, you got it in decimal and you got it as a fraction. And you also have an increase in government spending of 100 rand, beg your pardon, 100 rands. 0. So you need to fill in those figures. An initial injection, in this case, of 100 rand. We will want to know what the eventual benefit of this injection to the economy. And we're saying that the initial injection will lead to a greater than change in the level of income and output because of the multiplier. So the first thing we need to do to be able to answer this question is, what is the multiplier? How do we calculate the multiplier?
The multiplier is 4.
Right, so your multiplier is 4. Now, your government spending is 100. The demand for goods is 100. And your level of income and output is 100. Now, I want to know, firstly, in your first round of effects, what will your consumption be? Your consumption will be 0.75 of 100. What's 0.75 of 100? 75.
So,
what will your demand for goods and services be? The same, 75 and 75 for output and income. What about the second round? What will your consumption be now? So remember, in the first round, we got 75 for consumption, 75 for demand for goods and services, and 75 for the level of income and output. What will the second round look like? You're going to have a decreasing figure, right? You're going to have a decreasing figure. So it's going to be, the second round will be 0.75 of now 75.
Okay, it's 56.25.
56.3, good. So your demand for goods and services will also be 56.3. Your levels of income and output will also be 56.3. So what you can do in the third round now?
42,225.
Very good, very good. So 0.75 now times 56.3, which is 42.2. The demand for goods will be 42.2. Your outcome and income will be 42.2. And if you continue like this, right, your consumption will be 300. Your demand for goods and services will be 400, and the level of income and output will be 400 as well. So the end result is that there are many rounds that still has to go on, right? But we're not going to do that. So we'll continue until we get to 0. And you can see that the initial injections of 100 rand will lead to an increase of the income and output by 400. That's because of the multiplier. You understand that? So what is your initial injection? 100. What was your multiplier? The initial injection of government spending was 100 units, isn't that so? It's there on the screen. So what we calculated this, what was the multiplier? Yeah, what's the value?
The
It's
multiplier is
Yes, it's 4. Your initial injection will lead to a greater than benefit to the level of income and output. And why is that so? Because of the multiplier. So initial injection was 100 Rand. What is your multiplier for? 4 times 100 will give you 400. So that the injection of 100 Rand has led to an increase in the level of income and output of 400 Rand. Greater than, isn't that so? Why? Because of the multiplier, which is 4. Do you know how we got 400? The initial injection, your initial effect of 100 Rand times your multiplier, which is 4. 100 times 4 will give you 400. You want to do this?
Yes, please.
And go on. So we assume government spending is 400. What is the answer?
It's 4,800.
4,800 is correct. Go on to the second one.
It's 50-50. 5,050.
Very good. Anybody else have the answers?
I have the answer, sir. I got
Okay.
the same answer.
All right.
4,800. That is the first one.
Yes. Second one.
The second one I've got 5,050.
Good. Very good. There's your solution. Look at the last part. It's very important to understand this. We had an increase of 50 Rand in government spending. So that was the injection, initial injection, right? Increase is 50 Rand. What is the impact on the level of income and output? 50 Rand times the multiplier, which is 5. So 50 times 5 will give you 250. So the difference between 4,800 and 5,050 is 250. The change in injection from government spending from 400 to 450, right, led to an increase in the level of income and output. So the increase in government spending from 400 to 450, right, led to an increase in the level of income and output by 250. How did we get that? 5 times the increase in government spending of 50. And what is 5? Your multiplier. And there's your diagram. The original diagram was ZZ. Your autonomous spending was 960. You did the calculation already. And the ZZ curve cuts to 45 degree at point E0. If you drop that line, your level of income and output is 4,800. You did the calculation. There's it 4,800 for Y. Now, the second set of calculations. What was your autonomous spending? 500 plus 300 plus 450 minus 0.8 of 300. That'll give you 1,010 Rands. Is it, yeah? Look at the second one.
1,010.
So that's right. So there's it on the graph. So therefore, 1,000, because of the increase in government spending by 50, right? There's a parallel up. I told you this. If there's an increase, if there's a change in any of the autonomous, lead to a parallel upward shift. If there's an increase in the autonomous variables, if there's a decrease in the autonomous variables, that lead to a parallel downward shift. In this particular example, we have an increase of 50, and therefore your ZZ curve shifts up to 1010, and your curve is upward sloping also to ZZ1. It cuts the equilibrium, your 45 degree line at a new point, at a higher point, which is E1. So at the autonomous spending of 1010, your new equilibrium level of income is 5050, which we calculated. And the difference is 250. 5050 minus 480, 4,800 is 250. Your multiplier times the increase in your injection, increase in government spending. It increased from 400 to 450. 50 times your multiplier, which is 5, will give you 250. And that is the difference between 4,800 and 5050. Your multiple choice questions are not easy. And what will help you to understand the multiple choice questions better is to make sure you understand the theory, understand the diagrams and graphs, the calculations, understand the chain of events. But you'll find you'll need all of that information to be able to do a multiple choice question. And to get those answers right, you must know the theory. You must know the diagrams. Here's another one, yeah. Using fiscal policy to influence the equilibrium in the goods market. Now remember, at this stage, you got to know what fiscal policy is. Now I said to you there are two policy variables: government spending and taxes. And we spoke about government spending. We did examples of government spending. Now let's look at taxes. Slot those figures into the equilibrium equation, and let's see what we come up with. You're going to give me an answer for one, and you're going to give me an answer for two.
The first answer will be the same one as the previous one, the 4,800.
Yep.
The second one is 5,250.
Correct. Very good. You all got this? What is 0.8 times 50?
40.
So 40 times 5 is 200, isn't it so? So a decrease in tax of 50 will increase the level of income and output by 200. Again, remember here, your multiplier works in reverse. Although the decrease in taxes was just 50, the impact on the level of income and output was 200. And that is so because of the multiplier. Will somebody tell me what is an expansionary fiscal policy?
It is used to increase the demand for goods and the level of output and income.
Yes, and an expansionary fiscal policy is used to increase the demand for goods and services and the level of income and output. In other words, for there to be an expansionary fiscal policy, there must be an increase in government spending and or a decrease in taxation. But this will have the impact that it will have on the budget will be a budget deficit, because we're using funds from the budget, from the national budget, to fund the expenditure. If we take 50 million to build a hospital, where's that money going to come from? From the budget. So if we take out 50 million, 500 million from the budget, what happens to the budget? It goes into a deficit. It goes into a deficit. So an expansionary fiscal policy will result in a deficit in the budget. So this, you got to understand that first. So an expansionary fiscal policy means an increase in government spending and or a decrease in taxation. So therefore there'll be an increase in the demand for goods and services and the level of income and output. So what is the contractional fiscal policy, guys?
It's a decrease in the demand of goods and services
and
the increase in the level of income and output.
A contractionary fiscal policy is a decrease in government spending and an increase in taxation. Decrease in government spending and an increase in taxation. So this will have a positive impact on the budget. Your budget deficit will lead to a budget surplus. Use a diagram to explain how government spending can be used to achieve full employment. Comment on the magnitude of the government spending that is needed. The diagram that I get is on the screen now. You want to comment on that?
So there's an increase in government spending.
The economy moves from Y0, your output levels Y0 to YF. And at YF, we find that our resources are fully employed and we have full employment. The equivalent point is E1. Use the diagram to explain how government spending can be used to achieve full employment. There's no figures here. We just got to explain what it is. How do we achieve? In other words, your original demand curve is ZZ. It cuts a 45-degree line at the point E0, and at that point your level of income, equilibrium level of income is Y0. Right? To achieve full employment, right? There's a parallel upward shift in the demand for goods and services. In other words, your government spending increases, and the autonomous government spending increases, and it shifts. It's a parallel upward shift of the curve from ZZ to ZZ1. The ZZ1 curve now cuts the 45-degree line at the new point. The new equilibrium point is E1, and the new equilibrium level of income is YF. And we know at YF, your resources are fully employed, and your factors of production are fully employed, and nothing is left idle. There's your theoretical issue here. What is structural unemployment?
That's what happens when there is a mismatch in job qualifications and job requirements.
Good. So what is jobless growth? there is an increase in capital intensive industries. If the capital intensive industries grow faster than the labor intensive industry, you're going to have growth, but jobless growth. Wage increases. Workers always receive nominal wages. Now, what is nominal wages, guys? Nominal wages is rands and cents. It doesn't tell you what you're able to buy with those wages, or what's your purchasing power. Then we have your budget deficit constraint. Your budget deficit constraint should be 3% of your GDP. In other words, you can't spend more than 3% of your GDP. Your GDP is 10 billion. Your spending must not increase, must not be greater than 3%. There's a budget deficit constraint. Then we have something called crowding out. And crowding out simply means where there's an increase in government spending, which also impacts on the financial market. A rise in the interest rates due to increased government spending reduces investment spending by the private sector. But crowding out means that the government sector crowds out the private sector. Government sector, increased government spending will crowd out spending by the private sector. Because increased government spending will impact on the financial markets. And if that is so, your interest rates will increase due to increased government spending. And if that happens, remember, increase in interest rates will lead to a decrease in investment. The cost of borrowing is higher. And the private sector will reduce their spending because of the high interest rates. So crowding out means that increased government spending will also impact on the financial sector. In other words, because of the increased spending, your financial sector will increase interest rate. The increase in the interest rate will now dissuade. Your private investors will not want to borrow money from the commercial banks because of the high interest rate, because of the high cost of borrowing. And they will not spend them. Your investment spending by the private sector will decrease. So because of that, we refer to this as crowding out. The government sector crowds out the private sector. And the BOP, your balance of payments, may act as a constraint. The linkage between the interest rates and capital flows, which also impacts on the exchange rate. When we get to an open economy, when we open up the economy, you will find that there are serious difficulties that we have to face. And when we come to study unit 5 or 6, I think 4 or 5, and we will open up the economy, and then we'll see the issues that we have to consider when we have an open economy. So you'll find that the interest rates and capital flows in and out of the country will affect the exchange rate. What is the exchange rate? It's the value of one currency in terms of another currency. It's the value, one currency, in terms of the value of another currency. For example, the exchange rate between South Africa and America, to get $1 worth of goods, it will cost you almost 19 rands. You'll need 19 rands to get $1 worth of goods. That's the exchange rate, 19:1.